I would say we'll move on to the racism side now. I would actually, this will sound controversial. I'd say racism is worse in the UK than it is in Spain.
Mr. Mark, good evening to you.
Good evening, Dan. One day we'll have to do one of these videos in the morning, I think. Always the evening.
How goes it, mate? How's your week been so far?
My week's been lovely. The weather's been a bit weird here, lots of rain, but we need it, so can't complain.
And more on the way by all accounts. But anyway, we're not going to talk about the weather today. We are going to talk about a few things, actually. Racism, xenophobia?
Oh, we've debated about doing this subject for a while, in fact, and I think you're right to group racism and xenophobia together because both of us here are quite in with the local community, but both the Spanish and what perceived as a foreign community. So I would imagine we both have experiences of both xenophobia, racism on both sides of that coin, I would imagine.
One of the first things would be to clarify the difference between the two, really, because they do get confused quite a lot. So, for example, xenophobia, for those who don't know, a dislike or a prejudice against people from other countries. And it's what people perceive to be different. So, I mean, there are different explanations, and if you look at Wikipedia and look at Google and all the different things, but basically it's down to that, whereas racism is completely different. But they do go hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely here. I mean, it's the one. I think xenophobia, where we are, is probably more of a problem. Not to take anything away from the racial problems, which are quite well documented in Spain, especially at sporting events. Where do you want to start with this? Should we go from local experiences here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, as we've stated in other videos, we know our area because we lived here for long enough. We do try and talk about other areas. We do try and talk about different regions. And we will engage anyone that wants to join in, and they can join in at another time. Maybe even we can interview some people at some point about how they feel about their other areas. That might also be a good possibility to do. But let's talk about our area to start with. And for example, well, I mean, we've both worked in the trade. We've both worked in the service industry for a very long time. So I think it's ideal that we talk about that because that's where we have most experience. So for yourself, for example, within the catering side, within the bar, restaurant, it's very still to this day very evident that there are issues, but on both sides.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, we've talked about my experience of opening a bar here in previous videos. What I didn't probably express clearly in that thing, when I first came here, I cashed in straight away on the World Cup of 2002 because it was the obvious move to do. I think our first day was the first game of that World Cup. But it came pretty apparent to me quite quickly that the money was in the locals. And I soon started gear myself towards people who lived here. Now, when I say people who live here, I've got no problem with anybody. A local person, be it Spanish, Finnish, anything, I don't care. As long as they behave themselves, I've got no problem with that. But unfortunately, with the way the coast here is set up, and 1 in 4 in this town being a foreigner, there are little enclaves, our little ghettos, be it the Moroccan ghettos, be it the African ghettos, be it the Finnish ghettos, even the British ghettos. And each type of community caters for themselves. I mean, recently we've had an increase in immigration of people from South America. So you've got a lot more Argentinians, a lot more Colombians. There are an influx of those at the moment. And once again, they have shops catering for their own time. This only raises the temperature with the locals, especially as we've touched upon many times before, the housing issues, the things like that. And it's the first person that always is to blame is the last person who came in, basically.
Tends to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which is very unfair. I mean, because at the end of the day, the variety of people on the coast, well, especially on the Costa del Sol, but in Spain anyway, the variety of people is huge. And we've had various comments on a couple of videos, which we'll touch on another point, about the amount of people in Spain, the amount of immigrants, the amount of cultures that are in Spain. You'd have thought that by now, with that variety, it would get to be a little bit more acceptable now. And I know that there's good and bad everywhere, so we can go back to that shortly. But why is it still an issue? Why are we still finding that there's this animosity towards certain people?
I mean, as you pointed out already, we're talking about where we are here on the Costa del Sol, so we can't speak from the north of Spain or other areas. But it sounds awful. But there's a terrible stereotype when I got here, and you get a lot of kind of Brits would say, "Oh, if it wasn't for us, they'd still be driving around on donkeys," which is a horrendous thing to say, right? And then there is the thing that Spain is an upcoming nation, and its economy is allegedly one of the strongest in the world at the moment, whereas other parts of Europe are kind of stagnating a bit. So they are catching up. But back 20 years ago, people were coming in with money, and people here were generally a lot poorer than they are now, which sounds bizarre because obviously the cost of living and things like that. But well, I remember, you remember this, the early noughties. You'd go down strips and all you'd see is British bars, right? And all the signs would have British signage. There'd be nobody speaking Spanish. It was very rare. It was like a British ghetto. And what you hear over here, which is always a shame. I heard it recently from someone, and they know who they are, and they're going to probably pick me up on this when they see this video. Is I was in an Irish pub on a Friday night, and he was like, "Well, I'm over here, because." They're kind of taken over the immigrants in the UK. And I thought to myself, well, here we are on a Friday night sitting in an Irish pub, mate, both with our red heads. Yeah, red hairs. So it's not exactly we're kind of integrating on that particular night.
And we were talking off camera, we were talking about the fact that people that are coming to a country, okay, let's say for argument's sake, you're going to a country, you're visiting a country which is slightly less developed than where you're coming from, be it technology, be it education, be it something like that. We're not talking about third world or anything, but we're talking about the customs, the way of working, the work ethic, or the business model is different, and it's more successful in another country. And you bring that into a country that's not that way orientated, and it can definitely be seen like they're trying to take over and they're trying to tell you what you need to do or what you have to do. But in a lot of cases, all they're doing is giving you the tools to be able to grow and change the way you're doing things. Because just because you've been doing them for the last 25 years that way, it doesn't mean to say that now it's still a valid business model. Because you're not moving along with the times, you're not actually growing or attracting a different crowd, or even bringing in the best amount of income that you could by tweaking a few things and changing a few things. And that can be perceived as wanting to change the way they do things. When it really is, it's just helping.
But you make an excellent point there, because I ran bars before I came to Spain and bought a bar. And I tended to run my business like I ran it in London with the way the staff. They always made sure they had 2 to 3 days off. They were paid correctly, paid for the bank holidays, do things right, look after them, and things like that. And in the end, my staff would work very well because they were respected. I worked with them alongside them. I treat them as almost as an equal to a certain degree, and work just as hard as they did when it was necessary. But what you find here is people don't have that same mentality. The boss is the boss, and he doesn't do much, and he treats the employees very badly. Now, I used to get people just came to me, "Why is your bar so successful? Why is your service so good?" And I said, because I pay my staff correctly, because I give them days off. They have paid holidays, which unfortunately still here is still a bit of a problem. That is changing a lot, thank goodness, since COVID. But before that was an issue. So those kind of cultural differences that you bring from another part of Europe, and I'm sure people who have worked for me here have gone on to different businesses, have maybe incorporated that into a new business. I don't know. But it definitely was successful from doing that. If they learn from it is a different matter.
Yeah, no. Well, I had staff that when I was working in the golf industry for a long time, and I'd be doing the same amount of shifts. I'd be doing the same amount of hours in carting boxes around and doing whatever I needed to do out in the course, marshalling if it needed to be done, and dealing with customers, dealing with irate customers, dealing with arrogant customers, both on the English, British, and Spanish side. Because it's all fair and well saying, "Oh yeah, it's the Brits that visit," but unfortunately, you also have the Spanish that come down from different cities that visit us here, that think that they are slightly of a higher class and come in with a very different attitude. So it's not just the Brits, it's not just the foreigners. It is national people and local people as well. I
mean, I do notice. I presume it would be classified as xenophobia, because you get a lot of hate here between the different regions. I mean, the people from Catalonia get a hard rap. People from Galicia also get a hard rap. And even in the weekend, I was in a sauna and I was talking to this woman. She was from the Basque Country, and she made a very derogatory term about the people from Andalusia, as if she was superior, right? And you get that everywhere. You get the north-south divide in the UK. You get it. You get it in most countries. It happens everywhere, but it's maybe it's a sign of the times. Through Europe at the moment, there's a lot of far-right governments, far-right parties growing in popularity basically on the immigration ticket, saying how bad it is, even though countries need immigration. So it's all being stirred up, and it all adds into this horrible mixture and horrible ambience. I think it's probably. I said this before. I think it's worse now than ever before. The kind of foreigner feeling here. I said that on the previous video. When a friend of mine was at the train station, and she said she thought I was mad that I said foreigners don't seem to be welcome here so much anymore. And she heard a Spanish woman slagging off all the foreigners on the train station. Even my daughter today, when I said, do you get much racism at school? And she's 17, and she said in her class they still refer to Chinese people as eating dogs, and derogatory terms for Moroccans. They use the N-word a lot as if it's like nothing. It's quite sad. And she said, my daughter's half South American, and she gets referred to as a thief because she's South American, and they think that's funny. So it's, I don't know, it pretty from down here. Maybe this is going to sound awful again. Maybe 20 or 30 years behind when it comes to the UK with things like that, with acceptability. They still use the El Negro as a term to refer to a black person, whereas in the UK that kind of disappeared probably in the 80s. Yeah. Speaking to people down here who are African, I know they struggle a lot sometimes with being called negrito and things like that, which they don't like, which basically means little black or something like that. And they're like, why is that my nickname? Why do they have to refer to me in my color? And I've seen it in the bar on several occasions, be it during games of football with people making monkey noises at the TV and things like that. It's a strange thing. We should move on to the racism, really.
Yeah, we will briefly. The one of the things that we spoke about, and we've actually mentioned in a previous episode, and as you rightly said, I think it was the cultural differences. The abbreviation of names, so Sudamericano, Sudaca, for example, and that now is used as a derogatory word. It's used to insult people. Giri used to be used to identify a foreigner, but now it's used as a derogatory word. You've got the. I actually don't like the word. I loathe the word, which is an abbreviation of Hispanic, and it's used derogatory, and I hate it. It really does. It churns. It makes my blood boil when people use it.
But that word's kind of word that our grandparents would use, and that word's disappeared probably from circulation in the UK. Yeah. And there used to be another one from Italian as well, and the ones for the Pakistanis and the Indians as well. Those things have, over time have disappeared. Whereas here they're still used on a regular basis. Yeah. The Moroccan, the Moro for a Moroccan, it's another one. It's I always find that quite sad. I've told you before, I had a case only last summer, and a couple came in, an English couple came in, and it was a black gentleman and his white wife. And they sat on the table by the bar, and the drinks were waiting. I said, which one's who's the mojito for? And the bartender says, that's for El Negro, the black. Right? And I said, you mean the man? Yeah. But he automatically referred to him by his color, which doesn't mean he's racist, but it just shows a kind of a way of thinking, I suppose.
It's a difficult thing to get out of your system if you've been around it a lot, and if it's a family thing as well. As always, we're influenced a lot by the people around us, and if they've had that all their life, then it takes a bit of getting out of. And it does happen when they get into the workplace and they're around other people, and they come out with something like that, and someone goes, "What? What did you say?" And for it to happen a few times, for them to go, "Oh, hang on a second, maybe I can't use that anymore." Eventually, it will come out, as you say. That's how it's been flushed out slightly in the UK and other countries. It's still in the UK. It's just not as rife as it used to be.
I would say, we'll move on to the racism side now. I would actually, this will sound controversial, I'd say racism is worse in the UK than it is in Spain, strictly for the reason that I think the racism in the UK, even though it's probably of a lower level than here, less of, it's more serious and it's more hurtful. Whereas here, I think there is a level of naivety and ignorance, I think. I mean, I take the example back in this doesn't seem again fair to. It's 2004, I think it was. I was at that famous football match at the Bernabeu Stadium in Madrid when England played Spain, and a lot of tension had been was in the air before the game because the Spanish manager had referred to Henry as a monkey or a black or something like that before in a training session because Spain were going to play France in the playoff.
Right.
And the English press got on a high horse and started going on about it. So at the game, the English players, there's a lot of tension in the air. And I got into this, I wouldn't tell you the story getting into the game. That was difficult enough as it is. But when I was there, it was a real toxic atmosphere. And the fans were fighting with the police even before we got into the ground. But when we got in there, the big difference was the English fans were all middle-aged blokes, white blokes, right? And the Spanish crowd was predominantly families, right? And then as soon as the game started, they started making a few monkey noises at the Black England players, right? But it was almost like they thought it was funny. They thought they were making a joke. They didn't realize what they were doing, the serious nature of it. And that riled up the England fans, who then started coming out with some of the worst stuff I've ever heard in my life. And in fact, so much so that at half-time in that game, I walked out the stadium. Now, I got stopped by a security guard. He put his truncheon across me. He said, "Where you going?" And I said, "Look, I live in Spain. I don't want to be with these people. I hope Spain win 4-0, which, of course, I didn't want Spain to win 4-0, but it was, I found that a very, very sad moment. And the worst thing about that was the day afterwards, the press were reporting it as this, the English were whiter than white, and how good we were and well behaved we were. And I tell you what, the stuff I heard coming from the England fans was far vile than the monkey noises coming from the Spanish fans, which once again is extremely wrong. But I think it was a case of naivety and ignorance over pure hatred.
And we know through many occasions throughout the history of our football team and our national followers and stuff like that that no, not white and white, and there's been some horrible things that have happened over the years in different countries with travelling fans. There have been horrible things that have happened in the UK at football matches, but it also happens here. It happens here a lot. I was a season ticket holder at Malaga for 6 years, and even the old boys that used to sit 3 rows in front of me or 2 rows in front of me would insult their own players. They would insult their own players about them either being a gypsy, or either about them being black, about being and it was some of the things that were coming out. And they've been season ticket holders for 20 years. They were Malaga supporters when they were down in Tercera or whatever league, bottom league it was many moons ago. Yet they're still spewing out these derogatory and you go, why? What? Where's that hate coming from? Because it sounds like hate, and the way it's portrayed as well. It's not nice.
It was the famous one here, which was a big tipping point. I think it was 2007 or 2008 when Lewis Hamilton was his first year in Formula One, and Fernando Alonso was the world champion, and Hamilton was like this upstart, all right, as you would be at that age, and he came to the Grand Prix. I think it was Valencia. I think it was, and you had some of the crowd dressed up as monkeys. Right, blacked their faces out, dressed up in monkey outfits, and had Hamilton's family written across their chests. Right, and I remember at the time, it's horrendous. It's probably one of the worst things, racist things I've ever seen in any sort of sports arena. But afterwards, the British government got involved. It was turned a bit of a kind of diplomatic moment. But one of the guys was interviewed, who was in these monkeys. He goes, "No, you don't understand. It's just a joke. You don't understand. You haven't got the sense of humour." And I was like. That shows you there the naivety behind that, because it was quite bad that particular day and has been since then. So that's an interest. I mean, but of course he was Fernando Alonso's teammate, who's their national hero. So they thought they would upset him, but rather than calling him something else like a derogative, not a derogative, just using a bad word, they resorted to using his colour as a weapon, which I personally think. Was once again down to ignorance rather than actual hate.
Yeah, maybe. Just to clarify something as well, between both of us. I mean, I know. Well, I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure it's happened that within all of these sporting events, and mainly football. Let's say it right. The the amount of times that I have been ashamed to be called British, ashamed to be English because of the way some of the supporters, and I'm not going to say all of them, but some of the supporters, a percentage of supporters, have gone away to countries. They have caused problems. They have been racist. They have been downright destructive. It has happened on many occasions, many occasions. So we're not pointing out the Spanish alone, not pointing out the Brits alone. It happens everywhere. But just to show that I, for one, remember the times that I've been very, very disappointed and ashamed to call myself British.
It's very, very, very interesting you should say that, because this applies a lot here. I don't think Spain's a racist country, right? I'll go on record and say that. But once again, there's a press narrative to basically produce bad news or sensational news to get clicks or sell newspapers if newspapers still sell. So, for instance, if you take an example of a game of football now, and they say something like people were making monkey noises at Vinicius Jr. Now, majority of the stadium weren't doing anything. It was just a small thing. But it's kind of made out that all football fans are like that. And I remember recently, well, not that recently, England played Spain in Seville. I think they won 3-2 in the Nations League match. And there was up to 4,000 English fans there, right? Now, on one night, like 100 English fans went on a bit of a rampage, and they went down some back street, and they're smashing car wing mirrors and things like that after being drunk, right? But it's a tiny bunch, right? But the following day, it's portrayed that these hooligans have done this in Seville, but the majority of people have behaved themselves and gone about drunk. I've been to loads of games of football with watching England and watching teams, and the majority of people do behave themselves. It's unfortunately the minority will ruin it for everybody, and the press love to tap on the minority. And I think that goes as well with the narrative with racism in the football here. You do get occasions when the whole stadium will make a monkey noise and things like that when it gets out of hand. And we had a weird one here when Madrid and Barcelona were playing a home and away tie, and then in the Barcelona stadium, the Barcelona fans were making monkey noises at the black Real Madrid players, even though they had black players on their team, and they went to the stadium, and then they were making vice versa. Now, if I remember rightly, I saw several shows on racism in English football, which was very, very bad in the 70s and 80s, even creeping into the 90s. And it generally kind of disappeared when your own team got a black footballer or something like that. Could it be like, well, we can't be calling him a so-and-so anymore because it's going to affect him. But here, it's that doesn't seem to kind of play into it. And it's odd that some people get abused, while someone else won't get abused, yet they're the same colour.
They're just trying to get in their head, and I don't think they realise, exactly as you said earlier on, you don't think they realise what they're actually doing, because it goes both ways, and it goes towards or against the people that are in your own side as well.
But in that, I remember that game, the Madrid-Barcelona one, the home and away. The second leg was in Barcelona, and the Barcelona fans were targeting Marcelo, the Brazilian defender, and he was getting so much nasty stuff shouted at him. Then about the 60th minute of the game, or 65th minute of the game, the board went up. They made a substitution. Now, it was an African player, I can't remember his name, Eric Albergel, I think it was, who'd just been suffering from cancer and beaten cancer, and he was making his first appearance again for Barcelona. So the ball goes up, he comes out, the whole stadium stands up and gives him a standing ovation when he comes in and says, these are the same people who've just been making monkey noises at Marcelo 2 minutes before that. And it's just, I find that quite difficult to get my head around.
No, quite right too, because it doesn't make sense. But anyway, well, so xenophobia and racism, yes, they go hand in hand, and yes, they are. It is everywhere. We're not just saying that it's in Spain, but it's very clear that there is a distinction and a difference between the two of them. So that's what we wanted to touch on today. If you want to subscribe, please do, because that means that you like the content, and it means that next time we post a video, you'll get a notification, because it's just down there. You press that button thing down there, and it does that for you. You can also comment as well, because if you leave us a comment, there's something that's rattled you, something that's riled you, or even touched a nerve, let us know, because we can also talk about that as well in another video, and maybe clarify it and give it some thought. Yeah, why not?
Definitely. Right. That was the interesting debate. We could probably go on for hours about this one, really. As we're talking about, I can think of various moments in the bar when strange things have happened. But we'll save that for another day, I think.
Yeah, me too. Within the golf industry and other places as well. So yeah, but we
I,
have a
we
lot
must
to talk about another time.
Yeah, we must make it clear that it is an observation from where we are down south. I mean, it is an observation. As we expressed at the beginning of this, it happens on both sides. And there is a cultural clash between different nationalities, be it, even though the South Americans tend to speak Spanish, they have a clash in culture a lot of time with the local Spanish. But we even said now the local Spanish have a clash with the northern Spanish. So it is what it is. Unfortunately, that's the way the world is at the moment. Let's hope we can find a solution to all the world's problems and move on forward.
Let's hope so.
Eh?
Good to see you, mate. Good to speak to you soon.
You too, mate.